We're following breaking news, a terrible case of violence at the hands of a father who was once described as one of the most powerful men in Virginia.
Certainly this is a high-profile family. At one point in time, I think it's fair to say that Justin Fairfax, before he was lieutenant governor, while he served as lieutenant governor, and even afterwards, was a rising star politically, not just in Northern Virginia, but in Virginia.
Justin Fairfax was once the lieutenant governor of the state of Virginia, a husband and a father, and now he and his wife are dead.
From what I understand in this early stage, former Lieutenant Governor Fairfax was recently served some paperwork associated with an upcoming court proceeding.
We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Justin Fairfax was once considered a rising star in the world of politics, and he was a husband, he was a father, and knowing who he was, it makes what happened overnight just so difficult to understand. And I'll warn you as we go through this, there are some difficult details, difficult pieces of audio that you are going to hear.
Are stating that his dad might have stabbed his mom, saying that she's laying on the ground bleeding, can see holes in her shirt. Heard a fight about a minute ago, unknown where his father is now.
Now that's the call that dispatchers put out to law enforcement after a 911 call came in Fairfax, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. after midnight, and authorities responded to a home on Guinevere Drive.
It seems like the murder took place in the basement. It's described to me as a unfinished basement in the home.
Even though the initial 911 call came in as a stabbing, authorities say it was a gun used in this case. In the dispatch call, police found Cerina Fairfax, Justin Fairfax's wife since 2006, the mother of his children, in the basement, and she was dead. At that point, it was unclear where the former lieutenant governor had gone.
I haven't cleared the house out yet, but I have the son with me downstairs. If units on scene to clear the house, husband's car is still in the driveway.
Now, it sounds like police searched the area around the Fairfax's home looking for the former politician. It's unclear if they knew who he was at that time after they had found his wife dead in the basement.
It's going to be a 45-year-old unconscious, not breathing. We're looking for a black male, 5'1", clean-shaven.
But it was roughly 15 minutes after that first call came in that authorities found Justin Fairfax dead in a bedroom.
431 Alpha, we got another subject down in the bedroom upstairs.
Sure, 0023.
I think this is going to be our subject. He's got a firearm with him, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head.
Justin shot and killed his wife. He runs upstairs in the home and into the primary bedroom, apparently, and shoots and kills himself.
Police say the former lieutenant governor killed his wife of roughly 20 years, Dr. Cerina Fairfax, who was a dentist. The two of them met as students at Duke University. They had been married since 2006, nearly 20 years. They have two teenage children, and it was their son who called 911. Now, there's no reason a story like this will ever make sense, no matter who's involved, but police say the Fairfaxes were going through a divorce, and it appeared to be a messy one.
From what I understand in this early stage, former Lieutenant Governor Fairfax was recently served some paperwork associated with an upcoming court proceeding. That apparently led to this incident last night. Both of their children, teenagers, the boys older than the girl, were in the house when it happened. So that's horrible news for the family. Certainly a traumatic event for those children to live through. But we know that it all kind of culminated last night.
Court documents show that it was Cerina who filed for divorce in July of last year. She claimed the two of them had separated in June of 2024, but they were living together in the same home. They lived in separate bedrooms, but they were under the same roof. The document also states that the Fairfaxes had a post-nuptial agreement, and it appears that they had been arguing in court about that after Cerina had filed for divorce. They disagreed over how that P&A was going to be applied in their divorce. I have a divorce attorney, Randy Kessler, who's going to be joining me here in just a moment, and there's an interesting law in Virginia pertaining to divorce and how that may have factored into what played out. There's still, of course, so much that we don't know. Now, the document doesn't state what the reason for the Fairfaxes' divorce was, but police say that Justin Fairfax did call them and make allegedly a false accusation of assault against his wife in January.
In January of this year, Mr. Fairfax calls the police and alleges that his wife assaulted him. We responded to that scene. There are several cameras set up inside the house. Apparently, Mrs. Fairfax, at some point during these divorce proceedings, set up a lot of cameras inside the home. We reviewed those cameras, and we corroborated that the alleged assault never occurred. So there was no arrest made. There was a report written, but the allegation that Mr. Fairfax made in January that Mrs. Fairfax assaulted him was proven to be untrue.
Police say that Fairfax was not cited for making a false report in that situation. Police say there were cameras inside the Fairfax home that Cerina had put up as the divorce proceedings had gone on. And those cameras, police say, will be used as evidence in this case because they say the cameras were rolling last night when those gunshots were fired.
Well, I know that they were separated, living together. I know that there are divorce proceedings that are underway and court appearances that are scheduled and pending in the very near future. I know he was served some paperwork recently. Apparently the paperwork indicated when he was next to appear in court. That may have been a spark, and detectives will figure that out, that led to this tragedy here. Again, a mother shot and killed, taken from her children, and then he takes his own life.
Justin Fairfax served as lieutenant governor in Virginia under Democratic Governor Ralph Northam between 2018 and 2022. Fairfax was only the second African American ever to be elected to statewide office in Virginia. The controversy in his career came in 2019 when two women accused Fairfax of sexual assault they say allegedly happened between 2000 and 2004. Fairfax denied those allegations, which happened before he was married. Fairfax says his interactions with the women were consensual. One of them, according to CBS, claimed that they were sexually assaulted by Fairfax at the Democratic National Convention in 2004, and another accused him of sexual assault when they were students at Duke University, which is where he ended up meeting his wife. Now, Fairfax denied those allegations and said he took a polygraph test and passed. Also in 2019, Fairfax came very close to becoming the governor of Virginia. You may remember Ralph Northam was at the center of a controversy when an old yearbook picture from 1984 showed him in blackface at a party where someone was dressed in a KKK costume. The yearbook was from when he was in medical school. Many people called for Northam to resign, but he stayed in office. Had he stepped down, it would have been Fairfax who would have taken that top job. Fairfax himself ran for governor in 2021, but he finished fourth in the Democratic primary and then left public office. Once in private life, police say that Fairfax went into private law practice. And one of his final Facebook posts from 2024 mentions that he represented 7 of the 12 families of victims killed in a 2019 mass shooting at a municipal building in Virginia Beach. It is one of the deadliest workplace shootings in U.S. history. And that post mentioned that Justin wanted more mental health services for those who were impacted by the shooting. One other note on his divorce, the documents that we have show that his wife had hired a law firm to represent her in the divorce proceedings. Fairfax appears to have been representing himself. Joining us now to break down some of the details of what may be at the center of what is a very, very tough story, family law attorney Randy Kessler. Thanks for your time today. I read through this document and it just seems like it was a messy divorce, to say the least, between the Fairfaxes that was ongoing. What did you see when you read through it?
Well, I haven't seen the whole file, but from what I read, it was a, complicated divorce. And what was complicated about it was partially the laws involved, right? In Virginia, it seems, you have to be separated for a year. A lot of states have rules that say, we don't believe that you want a divorce. We want to make sure you want a divorce. You've got to be separated for a year before we'll give you a divorce. And maybe it was well-intentioned. Most laws are well-intentioned. I'm actually here right now, Chris, at the ABA Family Law Section meeting in Washington, where we talk about laws from all the different states and compare them. And a lot of people agree that when you try to make people stay together, thinking that will make them stay married, you end up with things like this, right? We're grown-ups. If me and my wife work on our marriage for 4 years and it just doesn't work, why should the state tell me I have to officially be separated for a year? Why do they keep me in that limbo? And that seems to be part of the problem. I don't know what caused him to snap. I don't know what caused the divorce, the murder. But, keeping people in a bad situation with the hope that maybe they'll stay married because marriage is a good thing, which it usually is, sometimes backfires. And this may be one of those sad occasions.
And according to police, Cerina Fairfax had just served Justin Fairfax with papers, and police believe potentially that may have lit, the spark that led to this terrible case of violence. Because when I look at this, like, they're living in the same house, and it's like the document says, like, I think she first said she wanted this divorce all the way back in 2024. And so, you have them separate bedrooms, but living in the same home. And it just seems like, from what we're learning, it was a very contentious relationship, to say the least. Like, how is it that people can actually live under the same roof, but then have these legal proceedings that are going on?
Yeah, it sounds crazy. And look, and I'm fortunate we've got a healthy, if you call it, a divorce practice where most of our clients can afford to find a second residence. Most people can't afford it. These folks probably could afford it. I don't know if they could or could not, but it's not uncommon. In fact, it's very common that you file for divorce and you don't leave the house because no one wants to leave the house where the children are, right? I'll leave the house, but then I'm leaving my children. Or I'll leave the house, but usually we have to figure that stuff out. What is going to be the parental arrangement? It's a scary thing to leave a house and not be guaranteed you're going to have access to your children or to your things. So a lot of times people start the case. When we start our divorce cases, it's often our advice that you do be out of the house. We want the client to be away from their spouse, because that's the danger inflection point. When someone gets served with divorce papers, it's a statement that the person who you love and care for and chose to be with the rest of your life has rejected you. As nicely as we can say it, as calmly and as manila, we can spell it out that this will be a simple divorce, no hard feelings. It's just not going to work for our client. There's just no nice way to say, I don't want to be married to you anymore. It's just the most offensive slap in the face, and sometimes people react harshly. It's a very terrible situation emotionally for most people. Every now and then two people will come to it at the same time, and it's a more simple, never an easy one, more simple process. And that's what I pray for when clients walk in. I hope that they say, me and my spouse have both agreed that we shouldn't be together. We just have to figure out how to divide the assets and share the children. That's my dream client that comes in. Unfortunately, there are not many like that, and we have to wait until they both accept that there's going to be a divorce.
So in this divorce document, they're talking about a P&A. I assume that's a prenuptial agreement that they had in place.
In this case, actually, Chris, I think it was called a postnuptial agreement because they were already married. So
all right, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
What is that? So how did that, like, in terms of the legal terms, I know we're talking about this, like, waiting period, where it said, like, in the P&A that he would buy her out of the house, and there's some things related to, like, mortgage payments, and then he was contesting that. And then apparently in January, he actually won that part of it. It seemed like, can you just, as someone who looks at these documents all the time, I certainly don't, like, what am I actually reading there?
So from a legal perspective, from an intellectual perspective, it was very interesting. First of all, we all know what a premarital or prenuptial agreement is. Before the marriage, you decide how you're going to divide the monies. You can't divide the children ahead of time because things change. Somebody who's a good parent today may not be tomorrow. But you pre-decide how to divide the monies. A postnuptial agreement does the same thing. It's just signed after the nuptials, after the marriage. So you can have a postnuptial agreement signed the day after the wedding, 10 years after the wedding, and it decides how to divide property. What's intellectually interesting to me in this matter is that in Virginia, you have to be separated for a period of time before the judge can grant the divorce. And what the judge found was that because they negotiated a postnuptial agreement saying in that we are signing this because we're going to try to make our marriage work, but in the event our marriage doesn't work, here's how we divide assets. Therefore, they were not in a valid period of separation. So he sort of turned the postnuptial agreement on its head to say, you can't get a divorce yet because you showed you were willing to try again. So that was sort of interesting. I don't think I've seen that before, especially because in Georgia, you don't have to have a waiting period. If you want a divorce, you figure it out and you get divorced.
Because then I also just, like, from the legal part of it, there's that intellectual back and forth, but then it's like police today saying that there was this call back in January, which was around the time, that is the month that, the court decided on that particular issue, where Justin Fairfax allegedly accused Cerina Fairfax of assaulting him, but she had installed cameras inside the house. And so police looked at those. No assault occurred. They say that the bar is pretty high to show that someone filed a false police report or something like that. So he didn't face charges, but it's like, how does the court system then look at that and say, well, yeah, we have this waiting period that we have to kind of figure out. But at the same time, it just seemed like a dangerous situation, at least on the outside, when you have something like that playing out, and yet they still are allowed to live in this, I mean, you can live wherever you want, but like they're still allowed to live in the same home. It just seems like there are some red flags that are coming up about how this was going.
Yeah. And those people that might be watching this show or this broadcast, I'd love to talk to them if they're going to be legislators or vote on certain laws, because legislators all think that making people wait to get a divorce until they've been separated for a year helps. In this situation, they were together. She might not have been able to afford to move out. She didn't, when you can get a quicker divorce, you know how much money you're going to have to afford to move out. You know what your time with the children is going to be. Yes, this was obviously a volatile situation. Anybody who's filed papers against their spouse is concerned that it could one day escalate. Somebody could just snap or break. Just the fact that, he's a public figure, nobody's immune from this kind of behavior. And, yes, there should have been telltale signs. But, Chris, we can't go in and change the law for one case. The law in this case is the law in all cases. You have to be together. You have to be separated for a period of a year before we can grant you a divorce. I think the back and forth, that might have affected the division of property. It might have affected the parenting time with the children. Unfortunately, with both of them being deceased, we'll never know, what their lives could have been like. But yeah, that's another sign that sometimes, and I also want to be clear, most legislators have good intentions. And when they say there's a waiting period, there are often exceptions. If there's family violence, if there's domestic violence, you can shorten the period. But what if there's almost domestic violence, and I know that my spouse is going to be violent when this happens, but it hasn't happened yet, and I can't prove it? Am I being forced to stay and try to stay married until something bad happens? It's a tough situation. I think if you're a grown-up, if you can make the decision to get married, you should be able to make the decision to get divorced. And I have a beef with legislators who say we're doing a good thing by making people stay married for a year and try to work it out before we as the state will allow them to get a divorce. We don't have a year-long waiting period to get married. Maybe that should be the answer. You should have to date for a year and know each other well before you get a quickie married. Maybe that would be a better solution. But, this is just there's no one size fits all. There's no right answer. But that is sort of an awkward issue that I sort of have a pet peeve about.
No, and it's a good point, because I think on the surface, you understand like the good intention behind it of like, you don't want people who are like, you get into a fight and you're upset and then you're just going to run to the courthouse and then, suddenly you're divorced and then, that ends up being a mess. But it just seems like from what we know about what's been alleged at this situation, that they were living in the same home. And then you have this day, and I know I kind of keep hitting on the same point. It's just like around the time police say he has served divorce papers, like they're supposed to go to bed in the same home at night, and it leads to this altercation. We don't know if he legally owned the gun. Not that that particularly matters, but you add a firearm to the situation. That doesn't make things any safer. And it's just like the idea that there's like, I mean, even outside of the state of Virginia, like on that day that papers are filed, I'm sure you've been there for that. Like it's emotional. How do they end up doing it? And then, the court just says, all right, we'll see you at your next court appearance.
Well, first of all, most Americans, half of all people that file for divorce don't even get legal advice. They Google it or they research, and they don't have lawyers. I'm going to give some free legal advice that I think is very valuable. And not everything is appropriate for everybody, but if you're going to serve your spouse with divorce papers, or any lawsuit for that matter, think about where you can be that's safe for the immediate time period following that, for the first few minutes, for the first few hours, for the first few days. There's nothing illegal about saying I'm going to be out of town or moving out of town or moving to a hotel for a few days until the other person digests what's happening and can get back to a rational way of dealing with it. It's just, if we save one person's life by getting that out there, great, let's put the word out there. But yes, you're exactly right, Chris. When you get served papers, even though you should expect it maybe because your marriage is bad or your spouse has told you they're going to do it, there's still nothing that can prepare you for seeing in black and white your spouse doesn't want to be with you anymore and they want a divorce and they want you to pay money and they want your kids. I mean, it's just a harsh thing, and it's a harsh day for anybody. The most solid, stable person, a lieutenant governor, former lieutenant governor, who could hold it together in public, even for him, that's a harsh reality to face.
Professionally, he was an attorney, and I noticed on the divorce document, he was representing himself. She had a law firm. He's representing himself. I mean, clearly I believe he was in private practice. since he left public office. I mean, this was someone who was a real rising star in politics, was the second most powerful person in a lot of ways in Virginia government for 4 years. But at the same time, I mean, you bring the emotional part into it, even someone who's an incredibly skilled lawyer. And I know as a divorce attorney, you'd like to see people hire, divorce attorneys, I'm sure. But at the same time, like, she has this law firm representing her, but then he, going through this, and he's the one who is being divorced. She divorced him. Like, how does that play out, I guess, emotionally for people? Like, is that a good idea to represent yourself, even though I'm sure you're saving a lot of money?
It's going to sound like a sales pitch for my book, Divorce.
Well, right. That's why I said, yeah.
But the truth matters, I'm not saying go out and hire lawyers and spend thousands of dollars. Have an initial consultation. There are divorce lawyers that will meet with you for free for an hour. Get some knowledge. Knowledge is power. People are using AI and Google, which can be okay. It can be a start. But, do some homework. And why not find a good lawyer for an hour? Even if you have to pay $200, $500 for 1 hour of time, or find somebody that will do it for free. Then at least you'll know what you're missing by not having a lawyer involved. Because, a lot of lawyers even that don't do divorce work dabble in it and think, I can do this. But it's not just law. I mean, we see in this case more clearly than almost any other case. It's law, it's human nature, it's emotion, it's common sense, it's practicality. And divorce lawyers who've been through this vicariously over and over and over see some commonalities. And maybe, just maybe, a divorce lawyer would have been able to prep them a little bit better, help them, guide them towards therapy. Who knows? But yes, I agree. It's not a good idea to proceed without a lawyer. But if you can't afford one, then you do the best you can. But take a meeting, find a meeting, get knowledge. There are so many lawyers out there that it's sort of hard to say, well, I couldn't find anybody to meet with. Representing yourself, there's an old saying, right, Chris? When you represent yourself, you have a fool for a client.
That's a good saying. Yeah. And I mean, we see it in so many cases. And I just imagine, like, if you're going through all these different motions back and forth, like you being the person involved in the case, like there's a level of emotion that comes with that, where I'm sure when you have an attorney, there's almost a buffer where they can think with more of a clear mind. I don't know how much that had to factor into all of this. I mean, of course, it's just a horrific story today, just for this, right. You think of the family too, the kids, man, it's tough.
You're right. Having a lawyer is a checks and balances. Look, it's partially why we have so many lawyers. We have 20 lawyers in our divorce firm, so that if I, hear from somebody and I want to initially react and say, yes, that's terrible, I can stop, take a breath, talk to my colleague and say, what kind of advice should I give? If you're doing it on your own, there's nobody to bounce it off of. Or if it's your family member, I mean, your parents are going to say, son, take care of yourself. You need somebody objective to say, stop. 5 years from now, you're going to look back at this and think, did I handle it the right way? So giving some time for reflection. And if you can't afford a lawyer, go to the person you trust the most patient person not the hothead, but somebody who's patient, your priest, your rabbi, your imam, whoever it is, that can give you a second to breathe and figure out what's best long term. It's a hard situation, and it's a tough one. There are resources. Use the resources.
Yeah, no, really good point on a day where a lot of people are going to be focusing on the issue of divorce because of what happened just outside Washington, D.C. Randy Kessler, family law attorney. Always great to have you bring some context to this here on Law and Crime.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.